Imagine for a second that an ancient text holds a hidden message, a message that's been locked away for over 3,000 years, just waiting for the right technology to come along and crack it. Well, that's exactly what we're talking about today. We're diving into the pretty wild and super controversial world of the Torah code.
So here's the big question that's at the heart of all this. What if there's a message, not from just anyone, but from a divine source that's been encrypted in the Bible all this time, and we're the first generation with the tools to finally read it? It's a massive idea, and it's what this is all about.
Now, proponents of the code don't just pull this idea out of thin air. They point straight to biblical prophecy, specifically this verse from the book of Daniel. They see this as a direct instruction: seal a book, hide it, until a future time when knowledge has exploded. A time that, sounds a lot like right now.
All right, so let's get into it. What is this huge secret that's supposedly been hiding in plain sight for over 3,000 years? Let's unpack the main claim. The central argument is that a message was deliberately encoded into the original Hebrew text of the Torah. Now, this is crucial. We're not talking about interpreting parables or stories. This is about a deep mathematical code that's been lying dormant, just waiting for computers to get powerful enough to finally find it.
Okay, I know this sounds incredibly complicated. So how on earth is this code supposed to work? Let's take a look under the hood at the actual mechanics of it.
The main technique they use is something called an equidistant letter sequence, or ELS for short. Here's a simple way to think about it. Imagine a huge block of text. You pick a starting letter, then you skip a specific number of letters, let's say 49, and grab the next one. Then you skip another 49, grab the next, and so on. If those letters spell out a word, that's an ELS. The computer does this for every possible starting letter and every possible skip number. It's a massive search.
So here's the process in 3 basic steps. First, you take the original Hebrew Torah and feed it into a computer as one long, continuous string of letters, no spaces, no punctuation. Second, a researcher types in a search term, maybe a person's name or a historical event. And finally, you unleash the software to just grind through the text, scanning for that term at every single possible skip interval. We're talking millions and millions of combinations.
So what have they actually found doing this? This is where things get really interesting, because we're getting into the so-called prophecies and the data that's presented as hard proof.
The source gives some pretty jaw-dropping examples. It claims that things like mankind landing on the moon or the Shoemaker-Levy comet hitting Jupiter were found encoded in the text. But the most famous one, by far, is the assassination of the Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. They say it was discovered in the code before it happened, with his name literally crossing the phrase, "assassin will assassinate."
And this is where the statistical argument really comes into play. Proponents aren't just saying, hey, look, we found some words. They're saying the odds of these related words and phrases showing up so close together just by random chance are astronomical. Sometimes they say the odds are more than 1,000,000 to 1 against it.
And it's not all about events from decades ago. The source points to more recent examples too, like a code table that seemed to predict a record-breaking freeze, which they called the glacial chastisement, for a very specific date, December 13th, 2013. And the key detail is this was published months before it actually happened.
Okay, so you might be thinking what a lot of skeptics think. Couldn't you find hidden messages in any huge book like Moby Dick? And that's the #1 counterargument. But the source tackles this head-on. They argue the Torah code is unique for 2 reasons. First, the statistical odds against chance are just way, way higher. And second, the code doesn't just have random words, it has related concepts clustered together in a way that creates context, something they say just doesn't happen in other texts.
You have to understand, the conviction here is off the charts. For the proponents, this isn't a matter of faith or interpretation. They see it as scientific proof. The source literally calls these findings provable messages from God, and they believe the statistics are hard data that no mathematician can honestly deny. So, if this code can supposedly predict assassinations and comets hitting planets, it leads to a massive question, right? What's the main event? What is the ultimate message these researchers claim to have discovered?
This is what they describe as the single most important, most world-changing discovery of them all. They claim it's a finding that other researchers are actually afraid to confirm.
So the whole thing reportedly starts with this one foundational phrase they found encoded in the text: "He is the Messiah." But that's just the beginning. It's what comes next that really forms the core of their entire claim.
That sequence apparently extends to include a specific name. It spells out Ar-Lir, he is the Messiah. For proponents, finding a name attached with this kind of specificity is the ultimate sign that this message was put there on purpose by, well, a divine intelligence.
And it gets even more detailed. The source says there's another long, 16-letter sequence that intersects with that main phrase, and it reads, "And there was God, and there was one Rael." Believers see this as a direct confirmation of the identity that was just revealed in the main code.
Now, you're probably asking, well, why can't everyone with the software just find this? The source explains it with an analogy. Think about playing Scrabble on your computer. If a new word, like crypto, isn't in the game's dictionary, you can put the letters on the board, but the program won't recognize it as a valid word. They argue it's the same here. Unless a researcher specifically adds the name Rael to their software's dictionary, the program will just see a random string of letters and won't flag it as a significant find.
So where did all this come from? I mean, this field of research didn't just pop up yesterday with the invention of supercomputers. The hunt for codes in the Torah actually has a really long and fascinating history.
This search goes way back. We're talking about a rabbi in the 13th century who described a very basic version of an ELS. But things really took off in the 1980s with the rise of computers, which is when Professor Eliyahu Rips really supercharged the research. A huge moment came in 1994 when his Great Rabbis experiment got published in a peer-reviewed journal, which gave it a lot of academic weight. Then, of course, in 1997, Michael Drosnin's book, The Bible Code, hit the shelves, and the idea just exploded into the mainstream.
And the list of people who've taken this seriously is pretty stunning. It stretches all the way from historical giants like Sir Isaac Newton, who was fascinated by it, to modern pioneers like Professor Rips, and even Harold Gans, who was a cryptologic mathematician at the NSA. It just goes to show you that this idea has captured the minds of some very brilliant people over the centuries.
So, we end up right back where we started. The source material doesn't present this as just a cool theory. They see it as a revealed truth, a verifiable message from a higher power. And it leaves us all with a pretty compelling thought. If you really believed you had access to this code, if you thought it held the answers, what one question would you ask it?